A bearded nobleman pressures the young master to find a daughter-in-law soon. He insists it's time to bring a noble girl to their estate for proper education. The man warns that delaying this will only cause problems for the next family head. The young master taps his fingers, clearly losing his patience. He coldly questions why the man is bringing this up when he already decided to leave the position vacant. The master calls out the noble's bluff, asking if he just wants to plant his own spy in the house. With a terrifying glare, the master immediately kicks the man out of the room. The terrified elders scramble out like their lives depend on it. Left alone, the master admits the elders' constant pressure is getting annoying. He knows if he brings in an elder-backed girl, she'll just act arrogant later. He wonders where he can find a child with zero political backing to fill the role. Meanwhile, someone aggressively calls out to a tiny creature in the hallway. A group of mean maids scolds a small albino beastkin for ignoring them. They hand her a broom and order her to clean the forbidden library at the end of the hall. The head maid threatens to starve the little creature if she refuses. The tiny beastkin waddles away, knowing she has absolutely no choice. The maids laugh, expecting her to get completely wiped out, but our little protagonist actually hears everything. She explains that in this world, beastkin possess a special power called equalize. But as an albino, she was born with basically zero equalize, meaning she can't even take a human form. She throws a tiny tantrum in the hallway about her miserable reincarnated life. It turns out she reincarnated into a novel where a Korean actress became a popular saintess. That saintess fell hard for the world's greatest dark mage, Caraxes Drivlane. She even offered a holy relic to win him over, but the mage completely ghosted her. Scorned, the saintess turned the entire world into an endless winter out of pure spite. Her tantrum sparked massive, devastating wars between empires over resources. And right in the middle of this chaotic plot, our MC ended up reincarnating. Worse, she became a lowly servant right inside the villain Caraxes's mansion. She stares at her tiny reflection in a bucket, realizing one slip-up will get her eliminated. She remembers her past life, which was equally depressing. She reflects that she didn't have a single happy moment back then. But she tells herself to hang in there, hoping for a better future as long as she gets fed. Pumping herself up, she bravely squeezes through the doors of the dark, forbidden library. Suddenly, heavy footsteps approach, and a chilling voice demands to know who entered his private space. The little beastkin covers her mouth, overwhelmed by a terrifying pheromone surge. The man steps into the light, completely towering over the shaking fuzzball. She spots his black hair and teal eyes, realizing she's face-to-face with the master of the mansion, a saber-toothed tiger beastkin. The master effortlessly picks her up by the scruff like a stuffed toy while she stammers out her excuses. Caraxes is totally caught off guard that this tiny animal can actually speak. She explains she was ordered to clean by the other servants, and Caraxes instantly realizes she's being bullied. He asks where her family is, and she quietly admits she has none. He presses further, asking if she has any friends or relatives at all. When she says no, a massive smirk spreads across his face. She's the perfect string-free candidate. To her absolute shock, he asks if she wants him to take her in. He smiles warmly and offers her the position of the family's daughter-in-law. The little furball completely short-circuits at the ridiculous offer. For a saber-toothed tiger clan, being a daughter-in-law is an insanely powerful rank. Caraxes looks down at her with a calm, handsome expression. She stares at him, wondering if he is actually being serious right now. He gently rubs her head, telling her they'll be seeing a lot of each other from now on. He officially introduces himself as Caraxes, leaving the little furball completely stunned. The master formally introduces himself as Caraxes Lushan Drivlane, and the tiny furball instantly recognizes the name as the ultimate villain of the century. She absolutely loses her mind, thrashing around as she wonders why the novel's final boss wants her as his daughter-in-law. She nervously questions if her second life is really going to be okay. You see, in the Drivlane family, the future daughter-in-law is brought into the household at a very young age. Eventually, she is supposed to marry the heir who awakens the dominant pheromone. This entire chaotic process is exactly how the next head of the family is chosen. But there's a massive catch. The heirs who awaken this dominant power are usually 2 or 3 siblings, meaning they constantly fight like stray dogs for the title. So in other words, the next family head is basically decided by whoever the daughter-in-law picks. The little beastkin admits that out of all her past lives, this is definitely the best gig she's ever landed. But she remains suspicious. Since the villainous Caraxes proposed it, she decides to probe him just to be safe. Throwing on her cutest face, she innocently asks what's so great about the role. Caraxes bluntly replies that she'll get to live in a mansion and eat rich food, making her instantly regret asking. Still skeptical, she questions why he chose her specifically. He smiles and explains they needed a good child completely untouched by the elder's political influence. He turns to leave, asking if that satisfies her curiosity. But she stammers and nervously begs to ask just one last question. Looking up with giant puppy dog eyes, she asks if she is simply becoming a contract daughter-in-law. Internally, her big brain is already plotting to hoard a secret stash of cash and dip before she inevitably gets kicked out. But Caraxes just smirks and hits her with a cryptic "who knows," leaving her sweating bullets. Suddenly, he calls over a maid named Nina and hands the shaking Furball over. The MC panics, completely convinced this was a trap to execute her. But instead, Caraxes casually announces that she is his new niece-in-law and orders Nina to treat her well for tomorrow's family meeting. He officially names her Sable and tells the maid to get her cleaned and fed first. Left alone, Nina introduces herself, promising to serve baby Sable with her whole heart. But when Nina mentions she's a cheetah beastkin, Sable almost flatlines, realizing she's literally the perfect bite-sized snack for a predator. Oblivious to her terror, Nina politely offers to help her with a bath. While filling the tub, the maid notices the little furball has been suspiciously quiet. She assumes Sable is just depressed about being an inferior albino. Nina gently asks why she's acting so gloomy all of a sudden. Sable stutters, apologizing for being so flustered. But before she can say more, Nina locks in. Without warning, the maid starts vigorously scrubbing the tiny beastkin, tickling her half to death. Gasping for air, Sable tells Nina she's honored to be served by someone so wonderful. Nina is completely stunned, realizing it's incredibly rare for a beastkin to speak in their animal form. She explains that their mouth structures usually make it impossible, meaning Sable is basically a tiny genius. Sable blushes, happy to finally get a little praise. But then Nina starts staring at her a little too intensely. The cheetah's predatory instincts kick in, and she literally drools, calling Sable so cute she could pop her in one bite. Sable squeaks in terror, prompting Nina to quickly snap out of it and apologize while drying her off. Bundling the traumatized furball in a towel, Nina tells her to get a good night's sleep. Finally alone in a massive room, Sable drops onto the mattress like a sack of potatoes. She drags her tired body across the ridiculously soft blanket. Sprawling out, she realizes this is the first time in forever she isn't sleeping curled up next to a dusty chimney. Staring up at the extravagant chandelier, she knows she hit the jackpot. But she also knows she can't relax just yet, considering she's surrounded by apex predators in a villain's mansion. Not to mention, she still has to convince the terrifying elders to accept an albino at tomorrow's family meeting. She resolves to play the perfect candidate for now, while secretly preparing her emergency escape funds. Since everyone thinks she's just a helpless little animal, she has the ultimate advantage. She knows the original novel's plot. Sable smirks, realizing that if she uses her insider knowledge of the Holy Empire, she's absolutely going to survive this chaotic household. She decides that starting tomorrow, she's going to secretly hoard small, light valuables. She is completely exhausted from wandering around like a possessed nomad and just wants to survive a long, comfortable life this time. For breakfast, she gets treated to a feast of fresh bread, goat cheese, and warm milk. Her eyes absolutely sparkle at the food, realizing this VIP treatment is way better than her miserable servant days. As she happily scarfs down her meal, Caraxes and Nina watch her fondly. Caraxes suddenly interrupts, warning her that dipping the bread into the milk will completely ruin the flavor. She freezes with her food midair, totally shocked that this notorious villain actually cares about her eating habits. Staring at his handsome face, she totally understands why the novel's saintess fell head over heels for him. But she quickly snaps out of it, remembering that in the original story, he was an absolute madman who raised armies from the dead. To make things worse, he even ruthlessly hunted down his own nephews who were competing heirs. Her dark thoughts are interrupted when Caraxes brings up the topic of her name. He casually drops the bomb that her official name on paper is literally Flea. Acknowledging that Flea is a terrible name, he reveals he went ahead and officially registered her as Florine. She grips her cheesy bread tightly, emotional that after 7 entire reincarnations, she finally has a real name. She smiles softly, thinking the name Florine is super pretty. Caraxes gently pokes her squishy cheeks, joking that she looks like a dried-up, wrinkled meatball. He murmurs that it's hard enough for them to get real meat anyway, and she nervously agrees that she's perfectly fine with just bread. He sighs, playfully accepting her modest appetite. But then he drops a massive, sweet cookie right onto her plate, telling her she needs to put on some weight. Florine practically tears up, realizing she's been on a forced dessert fast for what feels like an eternity. Caraxes tells her she can have as much as she wants, making her seriously wonder if the novel was wrong and he's actually a huge softie. Then he starts raining down a whole mountain of cookies for her to snack on. While she eats, he casually mentions they're heading to the family meeting today. The cookie literally crumbles from her tiny paws as panic instantly sets in. She remembers she's only here on the strict condition of becoming a viable daughter-in-law. In the original story, the stubborn Drivlane elders used these intense meetings to make all the major family decisions. She nervously grabs her cookie, knowing that if she doesn't prove her worth today, she's getting tossed to the curb. Reading her mind, Caraxes tells her not to worry about the old geezers since their criminal bounties are way lower than his anyway. He turns to leave, telling her to come out when she's ready. But before he can step out, she nervously calls out to him. Looking completely stuffed, she shyly holds up a giant pastry, admitting she ate a little too much. Nina watches in pure shock as the tiny furball boldly offers her leftovers to the terrifying master. Florine stammers, struggling to pronounce his name, and tells him he should eat some too. He stares down at her quietly, listening as she awkwardly thanks him for the room, the food, and his protection. Even though his words were villainous earlier, she knows he was just trying to reassure her about the scary meeting. Caraxes smirks, playfully asking if this little pastry is some kind of bribe. She panics and denies it, but he gladly accepts the treat anyway. At first, Florine was stiff and terrified, having no clue how to act around the ultimate bad guy. But now, she's using her big brain and getting quite bold with her new guardian. Caraxes smiles softly at the pastry, highly amused, wondering what kind of tricks this little genius will pull at the meeting. Later, tucked safely in Caraxes's pocket, Florine stares blankly as the elders absolutely lose their minds over her being an albino. They scream at the young master, furious that he plans to introduce an inferior albino into the next generation. Caraxes expected some pushback, but the old men are throwing a massive, embarrassing tantrum. The elders hate them so much that they completely cleared out all the seats surrounding Caraxes's side of the table. Caraxes smirks dangerously, muttering that he really didn't want to get violent in front of a child. He coldly glares at the room, telling the elders to stop howling like a bunch of wild dogs. Instantly, the elders start clutching their chests and coughing up blood, completely wrecked by his overwhelming aura. Peeking out from his pocket, Florine looks around and wonders where the actual head of the family is during all this chaos. Just then, a sharp footstep echoes as someone announces the arrival of the 18th family head, demanding total silence. The head's aide, an owl beastkin named Raftjern, dramatically marches in spraying pheromone remover, complaining that the elder's foul breath is polluting the air. Raftjern aggressively sprays pheromone remover, annoying Caraxes while Florine wonders what the notorious family head actually looks like. Enter the 18th family head, rocking a gray beard and a surprisingly tacky Hawaiian shirt. The elders instantly jump to their feet in respect, with one scolding Caraxes for not properly greeting his father. Caraxes completely ignores the reprimand, bluntly stating it's his choice. Even though he dresses like a tourist, the head's aura projects a massive, terrifying white tiger, proving he is not a man to be messed with. The head asks his aide what Caraxes is holding, and Raftjern guesses it's a rare albino marten for the young master's weird collection. But Caraxes casually corrects them, introducing the tiny furball as his father's new daughter-in-law. Florine practically retreats into his pocket, absolutely suffocating from the pressure. Suddenly, the head appears right in front of Caraxes's chest, staring deep into Florine's soul as she internally begs for her life. But instead of executing her, the head casually turns around and tells everyone to start the meeting. Florine blinks in surprise, realizing the terrifying man just smiled at her. Her big brain starts churning, knowing she can definitely use this to her advantage. One of the elders instantly starts complaining to the head about Caraxes taking an albino wife. He whines about her unknown origins, making Florine sweat as she realizes this guy really hates albinos. But before the elder can rant about ruining the next generation, the head silences the room with a single word. He coldly reminds the elders that he hasn't given anyone permission to speak yet. Turning to Caraxes, the head asks if his son actually has a logical reason for this wild choice. Caraxes bluntly replies that he'd rather not say, sending the elders into an absolute frenzy. One of the old men completely loses it, screaming curses at the young master. Caraxes snaps his fingers, complaining that the loud barking is giving him a headache. Suddenly, the elders' furious curses are magically censored into super polite compliments about a cute little puppy. Caraxes casually explains he filtered their words because swearing is bad for a child's emotional development. Getting back on topic, he explains his real reason. Florine is completely free from any regional ties or bribery. The elder freezes, realizing she is a completely clean candidate with zero political backing. Still, he argues they only recommended helpful nobles, especially since Lady Ariadne passed away and the heir position is completely vacant. The room temperature drops as Caraxes shoots the elder a death glare. He delivers a chilling final warning, telling the man never to carelessly speak his sister's name again. The elders freeze in pure terror, realizing they just stepped on a massive landmine. Florine puts the pieces together, realizing this timeline is set right after Ariadne's tragic death. She looks at the empty grand chair, realizing that was supposed to be her seat. In the original story, Ariadne was an absolute genius born with dominant pheromones. She was so perfect that she was destined to break tradition and become the first female lord of the family. Florine realizes Caraxes intentionally left the heir position empty because he's still grieving his sister. But then Caraxes suddenly announces he has something to say about that very position. He drops a massive bombshell. If his father accepts Florine, Caraxes will immediately take the position of heir. The entire room, including Florine, absolutely loses their minds at the insane proposal. Caraxes smirks, proudly asking if his new daughter-in-law is amazing for finally making him step up. An elder frantically argues that being a bargaining chip isn't a real ability. But Caraxes fires back, reminding them they previously claimed capability was the only thing that mattered. He smugly tells the elders to accept it if they really care about the family's future so much. Peeking out, Florine realizes Caraxes isn't just messing around, he is dead serious about putting her in power. The family head leans in, staring at the tiny furball with intense curiosity. He notes how fond his son is of her and speaks to her directly, leaving Florine scrambling for a response. The head is clearly testing her, waiting to see if this tiny creature actually has what it takes to silence the elders. Florine knows this is her make or break moment. Her grand operation to live a luxurious life starts right now. She bravely pops out of the pocket, loudly asking for everyone's attention. She confidently tells the head that she actually possesses a highly valuable hidden skill. Taking a deep breath, she prepares to drop some serious future knowledge. Throwing her tiny paws in the air, she screams at the top of her lungs for them to trust her and buy land. The head looks highly amused, and Florine confidently offers to explain exactly why this real estate investment will make them filthy rich. The head chuckles, completely convinced that the tiny furball is just telling a cute joke. But Florine is dead serious. She turns to the aide, Rafgjern, and politely asks if he has a map. With the map rolled out, she slams her tiny paw down on a specific territory. Looking the head dead in the eye, she tells him to buy this exact area. The head recognizes the land as Luxoria. He questions her reasoning, pointing out that the massive territory is completely worthless right now. Florine confidently explains that while it seems useless, it actually used to be incredibly fertile land famous for its wheat farming. She adds that even though it's currently frozen over, it's going to be extremely valuable very soon. Caraxes completely loses his cool, asking if she's implying that spring is finally returning to their frozen world. One of the elders fiercely objects, screaming that there's no way she could know about spring since she was born long after the endless winter began. The head leans in, seriously asking the little beastkin if she really knows what she's talking about. She doubles down, explaining that the snow will melt, farming will return, and they absolutely need to buy the land while it's dirt cheap. But when the head asks how she can possibly be so sure, she totally freezes up. Florine internally panics, realizing she absolutely can't tell them she read about this in a novel. Sweating bullets, she nervously looks over at Caraxes for a lifeline. Caraxes notices her struggling and decides to throw her a bone, while causing maximum chaos, of course. He calmly tells the room that Florine obviously possesses clairvoyance. The head looks confused, asking his son what on earth he means by that. With his signature smirk, Caraxes casually admits there's a tiny detail he forgot to mention. He drops a massive nuke on the meeting, claiming the little furball is actually a saintess. Florine practically short-circuits, screaming internally that this just made things 10 times worse. She asked for a tiny bit of help, not a legendary title that could easily get her executed. The entire meeting room immediately erupts into absolute bedlam as the elders lose their minds. While half of them think Caraxes is speaking pure nonsense, the other half are gullible enough to actually buy it. Cut to a week later, Nina enters Florine's room carrying a massive stack of gifts from the Believers. The maid adds the boxes to an already towering mountain of presents, asking where to put the new snacks. Florine furiously paces around, blaming Caraxes for digging her into this massive hole with his saintess lie. She thought the villainous master at least had a master plan, but nope. After the meeting, he simply told her to fake it till she makes it, right before casually walking away. She angrily snaps a candy cane like a twig, stressed out of her mind. Nina notices her dark mood and asks if the little lady is feeling bored. The maid gently offers to play a game with her since the blizzard has them trapped indoors. Florine politely declines, knowing that Nina is incredibly busy as Caraxes's one and only maid. Initially, Florine was furious that the master overworked a single servant to the bone. But she quickly realized that Nina wasn't just a maid. She was originally an assassin sent to take Caraxes out. Instead of killing her, he totally flexed on the assassin, locking her into a brutal 10-year forced obedience contract. Florine thinks this survival tactic is absolute genius, hoping she can pull off something similar if she ever gets kicked out. Determined, she asks Nina to fetch her a sketchbook and some crayons. Armed with her art supplies, it's time to map out a foolproof plan for her comfortable future. She figures if she keeps up the fake saintess act and becomes the official daughter-in-law, she'll eventually marry one of the heirs. But her biggest problem is that she has to stop the Drivlane family from collapsing, or she'll end up completely homeless. She vows to build a powerful foundation of wealth that doesn't rely on her future husband. To do that, she needs to fix the absolute tragedy of the original novel's plot. The story was originally about the real saintess healing the male lead's deep childhood traumas. Florine realizes that if she steps in now and prevents their suffering, the plot won't spiral into a total disaster. She sketches out her targets, starting with Dante, Ariadne's only direct heir, and Yuri, the youngest son with imperial mage blood. The third target is Gerd, who isn't Ariadne's son but belongs to a powerful royal family. Since the real saintess is currently sealed away, Florine is the only one who can save these kids during their childhoods. She triumphantly holds up her finished masterpiece of a plan. Sprawled out on her back amongst the gifts, the little beastkin smiles, knowing that if she pulls this off, she is absolutely set for life. Florine admits that absolutely nothing in her life has ever gone exactly as planned, so she better prepare for the worst. But before doing any heavy thinking, she definitely needs a sugar boost. Munching on her candy, she happily thinks that being a fake saintess definitely has its perks, wishing she could keep it up forever. Looking out the window at the snow, she figures once spring officially arrives, fewer people will suspect her of being a fake. She impatiently wonders when spring is actually going to show up, when suddenly there's a loud knock at her door. Nina turns around in confusion as Florine jumps, wondering who could be visiting her. Rafjern's voice calls out from the hallway, announcing that the Lord has specifically requested Lady Florine's presence. The aide swings the door open, calling out to her. Florine nervously squeaks, holding her paws up in the air as every single nerve in her tiny body screams in pure panic. Rafjern pushes up his glasses, telling her he'll escort her to the Lord immediately. As they head down the hall, Florine realizes this must mean spring has finally arrived. She smirks, knowing it's finally time to start cashing in on her Holy Empire intel for real. In the meeting room, an aide excitedly points out to the Lord that it's exactly as the tiny beastkin predicted. Fresh, green sprouts have officially been discovered breaking through the snow in Luxoria. The Lord smiles, glad he trusted the Furball and bought the land, knowing its value is about to absolutely skyrocket. Just then, Rafjern announces his arrival outside the door. The aide walks in holding Florine, who waves enthusiastically at the head while internally chanting a desperate prayer not to get dropped. The head smiles warmly, asking how she's been and politely asking for a reminder of her name. She formally introduces herself as Florine, noting that the terrifying man is in an unusually good mood today. He gestures to the table, inviting her to have a seat and enjoy a cup of milk. But the mug he gives her is massive, leaving the tiny furball struggling to even take a sip without falling in. The head quickly apologizes, promising to have custom tiny dishware made just for her. He proudly declares that they absolutely must take care of the treasure of their house, making the other aides nod in agreement. Florine is completely shocked, realizing everyone in the room is suddenly looking at her with incredibly warm eyes. The family head stands tall, looking down at her with genuine affection. She wiggles happily, deciding that if this is what being a fake saintess feels like, she's going to ride this wave all the way to the bank. Getting down to business, the head confirms the reason he called her is because her prediction about Luxoria actually came true. He admits he wants to ask her a few more questions about the area, and Florine eagerly agrees. The head explains that since they bought the entire region a week ago while it was still frozen, they got it for dirt cheap. Now that it's thawing, he asks if it would be all right to till all the land and turn it into massive farmland. He assumes that since it was originally a wheat-growing region, they should start plowing immediately. But Florine aggressively waves her paws, completely rejecting his basic farming idea, claiming there's a way to make the value skyrocket instantly. The head looks surprised but quickly catches on to her hidden meaning. Florine watches his face change, realizing this whole conversation was actually a secret test. He wants to see if her business sense is really as sharp as her predictions. Knowing she has no choice but to pass, she drops her cute act and puts on her serious face. The head leans in, highly intrigued, asking to hear her brilliant idea. She calmly explains that while his farming method isn't terrible, her plan is vastly superior. Pumping her fists in the air, she declares they shouldn't farm it at all. they need to auction the land off to the imperial family at an insanely high price. In the original novel, the very first sprout of spring appearing in Luxoria completely shook both the magic and holy empires. The moment the news breaks, the land's value will shoot into the stratosphere. She explains that if Drivlane farms it themselves, everyone will just spread nasty rumors that the villainous family is monopolizing the arrival of spring. Plus, even at maximum capacity, Luxoria's crops alone could never feed the entire magic empire anyway. So she concludes that while the whole world is desperately eyeing the land, they need to sell it off to the highest bidder and walk away with mountains of gems. The head is extremely impressed, asking the little furball how she managed to come up with such a ruthless, brilliant strategy. Florine innocently shrugs, claiming her brain just works super fast when it needs to. Internally, she knows that in the original story, despite being the villains, the Drivlane family strictly rewarded good performance. So her logic is simple: the more expensive they sell the land, the bigger the cut she gets to keep. Wanting to keep the momentum going, she excitedly tells the Lord she has one more piece of highly valuable information. The head leans back, stroking his beard with a massive grin, absolutely hooked on whatever this tiny, genius furball has to say next. Reminding him of her earlier prediction, she excitedly confirms that just as she said, spring is officially coming. The head nods, realizing that soon spring won't just hit Luxoria, it will melt the entire world. Florine eagerly wiggles her paws, imagining how absolutely furious the royal brats are going to be when they have to pay a fortune for the land. The head and his aides completely agree, bursting into evil, villainous laughter as they imagine the imperial family getting totally scammed. Florine suddenly realizes she's cackling like a supervillain right along with them, wondering why she fits in so perfectly with these bad guys. But honestly, she admits that getting sweet revenge on the royal family feels even better than the money itself. Snapping back to business, she calls out to the head, warning him that her master plan isn't quite finished. She looks up and asks if the Drivlane estate happens to have any stock of seeds and fertilizer. The head's eyes go wide as he instantly catches on, realizing she wants to sell Drivlane's private agricultural research. He strokes his beard, highly impressed that she wants to completely seize the farming market before anyone else can even react. Florine throws her paws in the air, confidently declaring that if they do this, Drivlane will absolutely hit the jackpot. The reason she's so confident is because, in the original story, Drivlane was mainly known for military weapons like golems and bombs. But secretly, the family was also insanely knowledgeable about crop cultivation. That's because the current Duchess is actually a legendary spirit summoner who made a contract with the Earth Spirit. To help feed the starving people during the endless winter, she secretly spent years researching how to grow crops completely indoors. Thanks to her dedicated, high-level magic research, the seeds held by House Drivlane are genetically stronger than any other houses. Now that the snow is finally melting, Florine knows these super seeds will absolutely dominate the new agricultural market. However, she realizes there's a massive plot hole. Only inner Drivlane members are supposed to know this secret information. As expected, the head's eyes narrow with deep suspicion as he asks exactly where she got this classified intel. Florine sweats nervously, realizing that no matter how smart she acts, knowing this secret is way too suspicious. Left with zero options, she decides she has no choice but to completely sell Caraxes out. Putting on her most innocent face, she stammers, finally blurting out that Kiss told her. The head almost chokes on his own spit, asking if she actually meant Caraxes. The aides completely lose it, bursting into laughter while Florine aggressively defends herself, whining that his real name is way too hard to pronounce. She spins a massive lie, claiming she told Kiss she wanted to help the family and he secretly gave her the seed intel. The head buys it completely, giving her a big thumbs up and praising her tiny, brilliant head. He warmly declares that such an admirable child definitely deserves a reward, making Florine's ears perk up. He explains that Drivlane's nature is to take whatever it wants without any shame. But he notes she can't just take things freely. She has to boldly name the price of her own accomplishments to prepare for her future as the lady of the house. Florine realizes this isn't just a reward. The head is officially accepting her as a true member of House Drivlane. She gets a little emotional, reflecting on how she's spent all her past lives wandering with nowhere to belong. But now, for the first time ever, she finally has a real home. The head leans down, gently asking her how much she thinks her massive contribution is truly worth. Florine knows the elders and the aides are watching her closely, waiting to see if she has the ambition worthy of a Drivlane daughter-in-law. Realizing this is her final, ultimate test, she takes a deep breath. Determined to show them she's not just a cute pet, she decides to ask for the most outrageous thing she can think of. The aides completely panic as she opens her mouth, terrified she's going to demand the entire Drivlane estate. The head waits patiently as the tiny beastkin points directly at him. With absolute confidence, she loudly declares that she wants to have Drivlane itself. Before anyone can pass out, she quickly clarifies her bold statement. Striking a heroic pose, she announces that since Drivlane is the strongest and best family in the entire world, she just wants to be part of it. The aides nervously mutter among themselves, realizing she basically just asked for the family head's absolute protection. Florine drops her pose, internally panicking and wondering if asking for their full backing was a little too greedy. Suddenly, the head swoops down and scoops her up, calling her an adorable little genius. The aides jump in surprise as the normally terrifying lord completely melts over the tiny furball. He tells her he can't give her the entire family just yet, but he promises to give her something equally amazing. Handing her back to the aide, he officially grants her a private bedroom on the highly exclusive second floor of the main building. Florine literally cheers, throwing her paws up in the air and thanking him profusely for the massive upgrade. The head rubs his chin, muttering that just giving her a fancy room still feels a bit lacking for her brilliant contribution. He looks down at her and casually asks how old she is, making Florine completely freeze as she realizes she actually has no idea. Florine thinks that if she could just transform into a human, she'd finally be able to figure out her exact age. She droops sadly, wondering if being a rare albino is the reason her magical powers are completely blocked. The family head notices her slump and quickly reassures her, saying he only asked because she looks like she needs a nanny. He promises that if she ever wants a human form, he'll personally scour the earth to find a way to make it happen. Petting her tiny head, he warmly adds that even if she stays a furball forever, she's still an official Drivlane. Florine's eyes widen as she realizes she's actually secured her permanent spot in the villainous family. Clenching her tiny paws, she vows to prove she's not just a freeloader but a massive asset. She pops back up and tells the head she has one more crucial piece of intel to share. She demands a map, and an aide immediately unrolls one across the table. The aide eagerly asks if there's more land to completely scam the imperial family with, but she shakes her head. Pointing her little paw at the parchment, she rapidly taps 3 highly specific locations on the military front lines. She drops a total bomb, boldly declaring that all these areas are about to be hit with massive, sudden floods. The aides completely freeze, questioning if they should really trust a child with critical war intelligence. Sweating, Florine desperately begs them to believe her. She reminds them her spring prediction was dead on, warning they'll totally regret ignoring her this time. Plus, if the estate floods, she'd be wrecked too, so she has absolutely zero reason to lie. The head stares at her fierce confidence, thinking she truly has the ruthless swagger of a Drivlane. With zero hesitation, he orders Raeliana to secretly deploy the warning to their troops. One of the aides panics, asking if the head is acting way too hastily. But the head tells him to use his brain. The aide realizes it's a total win-win. If true, they save their soldiers. If false, they just completely mind-game the Holy Empire. Smiling down at her, the head admits that above all, he just wants to trust the little genius. He dismisses her to go pick out her new bedroom while the adults handle the military strategy. Florine clutches her chest, incredibly touched that this terrifying villain actually believes in her. She looks back, genuinely hoping her novel knowledge will save the soldiers' lives. True to his word, she immediately gets her own absurdly lavish, massive bedroom. Not only that, but she gets an elite staff, starting with Evangeline, a badass caracal beastkin nanny. Then there's Linda, a sweet lamb beastkin maid, and John, her massive bear bodyguard. John gives a respectful bow, ready to completely throw hands for the tiny furball. Florine realizes she basically hit the jackpot, scoring a full VIP security and pampering team. Later, Linda lovingly spoon-feeds her a literal mountain of pudding. Florine chews happily, absolutely vibing in her new life of pure luxury. Suddenly, the nanny and bodyguard completely lose it, jealously begging for a turn to feed her snacks. Watching them playfully fight over her, Florine reflects on how unimaginable this was when she was scrubbing floors. Her popularity is skyrocketing, and she wonders if Caraxes even knows she's basically running the house now. Turns out, right after that meeting, Caraxes officially took over as the young family head and got swamped with work. Florine feels a little salty, thinking he just dumped her in a fancy room and ghosted. She rolls around with Pompom, a tiny golem Caraxes gave her during his last visit. She flashes back to 2 nights after the meeting, resting in her giant bed. Caraxes randomly materialized in the moonlight, asking if she was asleep, and she totally sassed him about the late hour. He admitted his timing was bad, but he knew if he didn't give her this gift now, he wouldn't get another chance. A glowing blue magic circle instantly lights up his hand. Suddenly, the tiny, blocky golem pops out of thin air. He explains it's a communication golem, though Florine internally jokes that he just wanted an excuse to talk to her. He adds that if she double taps its head, it acts as a perfect translator even if she speaks like a wild animal. She hugs the little robot tightly, completely thrilled with her awesome new gadget. Caraxes gives her a rare, soft smile, genuinely glad she likes it. Snapping back to the present, she realizes they haven't spoken a single word since that night. Staring out the window, she admits she's a little bummed, but knows her villainous benefactor is just busy running an empire. At least she has Pompom, the communication golem Caraxes gifted her, to keep her company. Staring at the little robot, she decides she needs to work even harder to stay in Caraxes's good graces. She happily squishes the golem against her cheek, telling Pompom she's counting on him from now on. Suddenly, outside her room, two maids spot her leaving and completely fangirl over her. John the bodyguard casually balances the tiny saint on his head as they walk down the hall. The maids gush about how her warning about the ambush saved a younger brother on the front lines, and they even managed to launch a counterattack. Florine remembers exactly what went down a few days ago. The driveling troops were stationed in the freezing snow, hyping themselves up to teach the Holy Empire a lesson. Following Florine's intel, they prepared a massive, brutal ambush in the dark woods. The captain smirked, drawing his blade and ordering his men to wipe the enemy out. But the Magic Empire forces were completely wrecked when the Holy Empire troops launched a devastating surprise attack of their own. The Magic Empire captain lay bleeding in the snow, shocked that they were the ones who got ambushed. Luckily, because of Florine's prediction, the main driveling forces were already prepared and completely stopped the slaughter. The story of her miracle prediction spread like wildfire, turning her into an absolute superstar across the estate. However, not everyone is thrilled. Some of the stricter servants still mutter that having a lowly albino represent driveling is embarrassing. Florine casually listens from John's head, completely unfazed by the haters. But the loyal maid fiercely defends her, angrily yelling that the saint isn't just an albino. She claims the saint lost her human form because she used up all her magical power to bring spring. Florine smirks, realizing her fake rumors are spreading perfectly. In a flashback, she remembers nervously snacking on a cookie while the family head randomly summoned her. He stared down at her, making her tiny heart race. Without warning, he bluntly stated that he absolutely did not believe she was a real saintess. Florine completely panicked, sweating bullets as she wondered how her master plan got busted so quickly. But the head calmly took a sip of tea, explaining he doesn't believe in gods anyway, so it doesn't matter to him if she's real or not. Florine let out a massive sigh of relief, realizing she wasn't getting executed today. The head smiled wickedly, revealing his true villainous plan. He was going to declare the Holy Empire's actual saintess a fake, elevating Florine as the only true bringer of spring. Snapping back to the present, Florine is actually glad he did it, knowing no one will dare mess with her now. Plus, once spring fully arrives, a peace treaty will be signed, meaning she won't have to stress about predicting any more ambushes. Still, she knows she can't just slack off and be lazy, she has to earn her keep. John notices her deep in thought and asks if she's feeling unwell. She quickly covers, saying she was just trying to think of the perfect way to praise the head chef for his delicious pudding. She calls Pompom over to translate for her. She figures if Caraxes hears she's getting along with the staff, he'll definitely be pleased. Suddenly, John stops in his tracks, hearing a strange noise down the hall. Following the sound of loud sniffles, Florine realizes it's coming from the kitchen and orders John to investigate. Peeking around the doorframe, Florine immediately recognizes the crying voice. Inside, the head chef is completely broken down on the floor, while two maids try to comfort him. The poor man turns around, tears streaming down his face as he recognizes her voice. Florine happily waves from John's arms, greeting her favorite chef, Jeffu. Jeff wipes his face, surprised to see the young lady visiting the kitchen. She loudly thanks him for making such amazing treats, knowing she needs to keep this guy on her good side. Jeff is incredibly touched, his eyes welling up with even more tears at her sweet praise. But Florine tilts her head, genuinely confused as to why the massive man is sobbing. She fiercely demands to know who bullied him, promising to scold them herself. Touched by her defense, Jeff absolutely completely loses it, bawling his eyes out like a baby. One of the kitchen aides nervously leans in and tells Florine to look over at the counter. Florine squints, wondering who could possibly make the head chef cry this hard. When she sees the massive mess of wasted, ruined food, her blood boils. The aide explains that a bunch of the young heirs have been violently protesting the meals, and today they finally made Jeff snap. Florine realizes that if these spoiled brats are heirs, she might actually have to marry one of them someday. Furious that they would waste precious food during a famine, she screams at the aide to name names, absolutely refusing to marry trash like that. Suddenly, a snooty voice rings out from across the kitchen, demanding to know if that tiny creature is the rumored albino. A young boy scoffs in disbelief, muttering that he thought the family head was just making a bad joke. The blonde kid crosses his arms, deeply offended at the idea of marrying an albino beast. The kitchen aide pales in absolute terror, recognizing the boy instantly. He bows deeply, frantically addressing him as young Master Gerd. Florine's ears perk up. Wait a minute, Gerd. She realizes this is the exact same kid from the novel who pathetically fell to his knees and begged the original saintess not to leave him. In the story, he was portrayed as this beautifully tragic, obedient pretty boy. But looking at him now, he's just a squishy-cheeked, spoiled crown prince of the Lichenvium kingdom. Gerd bursts out laughing at the sight of her, mocking her tiny, pathetic appearance. Florine rolls her eyes from John's arms, thinking he's just acting like a bratty little kid. But her lack of reaction pisses Gerd off, and he glares at her, demanding to know what she thinks is so funny. John steps in, firmly warning the young master not to refer to Lady Florine as that thing. Florine practically melts into John's chest, thinking his deep, protective voice is incredibly cute. But Gerd completely loses his temper, furious that a lowly albino is openly mocking him. He steps toward John, throwing a tantrum and demanding the knight hand her over right now. John easily blocks the kid, coldly reminding him that violence is strictly forbidden in the estate. Gerd screams at the bear knight, accusing him of taking the albino's side over a royal prince. John calmly replies he's just stopping a fight, effortlessly holding the tiny furball out of the angry prince's reach. Gerd totally loses his mind, violently stomping his feet on the ground because Florine won't stop laughing at his ridiculous fit. He absolutely explodes, screaming that this useless creature doesn't even have noble blood. Suddenly, poof, Pompom the translation golem magically appears in Florine's paws. Florine completely forgot about Pompom's refined speech filter. The golem loudly translates her wild laughter into polite, formal chuckles, making the situation even funnier. As John carefully holds her shaking body, Florine thinks it's hilarious that this pathetic, stomping kid is actually one of her husband candidates. Gerd's face turns beet red with rage, absolutely sick of her mocking him. He screams that the awful food and the terrible room were bad enough, but her attitude is making him even more furious. Florine's amusement instantly vanishes as she connects the dots. She glares daggers at the prince, her voice dropping as she realizes he's the one who trashed the kitchen. Pointing her little paw, she directly accuses him of throwing the chef's hard work into the garbage. Gerd flinches, genuinely startled that the tiny creature suddenly looks incredibly intimidating. But his royal pride kicks back in, and he yells that he did throw it away, challenging her to do something about it. Florine looks back at the sobbing Chef Jeff, her blood boiling that someone this cruel is a potential heir. She uses Pompom to boldly declare that forget being an heir, he's just a genuinely terrible person. She lectures the prince, telling him that instead of being grateful to the people cooking for him during a famine, he humiliated them. Gerd's face flushes with pure embarrassment as her harsh words hit home. But he tightly clenches his fists, furious that a lowborn creature dares to talk down to him. He points a shaking finger at her, screaming that once they get married, he's going to lock her in a tower for the rest of her miserable life. John steps forward protectively, but Florine isn't scared. She's actually thinking about the novel's lore. She remembers that Gerd's father, the king of Lichenvium, had a massive harem of concubines. And when the king grew tired of them, they were violently dragged away and permanently locked inside a miserable tower, left to beg for mercy until they died. In the original story, an older Gerd cried to the saintess, promising he would never be like his father and just wanted to look at her forever. But right now, the kid is literally threatening her with the exact same royal abuse. John growls, warning the young master he's officially crossed the line and will be reported to the family head. Florine shakes her head. She gets that Gerd grew up incredibly pampered, but hearing him act so arrogant just makes her scoff. She turns away from him, completely dismissing the spoiled brat. Using Pompom, she flat out asks him who said she was ever going to marry him in the first place. She calls him a dummy, reminding him that there are plenty of other, much better candidates in the estate. Gerd visibly trembles, realizing she holds all the cards. If he physically attacks her now, he'll permanently lose his chance at becoming the family head. Looking at John's massive, imposing figure, Florine figures the kid is too cowardly to actually start a fight anyway. Deeming him completely pathetic, she tells John they're leaving, entirely ignoring the fuming prince as they walk out of the kitchen. As they leave, Florine reflects on the original story, where Gerd eventually awakened as a powerful alpha and became a strong contender for succession. Gerd glares at her retreating back, furious that this tiny creature dared to humiliate him in front of the servants. Clenching his fist, he decides to completely disregard the rules and show her exactly what he's made of. A violent surge of magic suddenly erupts behind them. John shouts a warning, trying to shield the young lady. Gerd laughs maniacally as he summons a massive, glowing blue spirit bird to attack them. Florine screams in pure terror, thinking this kid has completely lost his mind. The giant wind spirit violently circles them, its sharp claws narrowly missing the dodging knight. Gerd proudly brags that this is his royal family's protective spirit, clearly expecting them to beg for mercy. But Florine stubbornly refuses to back down, letting out a wild shriek as the bird dives at her again. She tightly squeezes her eyes shut, getting super motion sick from the spirit violently tossing her around. John quickly draws his sword, coldly declaring that his orders are to protect the young lady above all else, even if it means forcefully banishing a royal spirit. Gerd is absolutely stunned, outraged that a mere knight would dare point a blade at him over a worthless albino. Sick of the entire situation, John easily swats the spirit away and gently tosses the dizzy furball to the ground. Florine lands with a soft thud, her eyes spinning in circles from the wild ride. She angrily mutters that she tried to be the bigger person, but she just can't take this spoiled brat anymore. With a fierce burst of speed, she practically flies out of John's hands, rocketing straight toward the prince. Before Gerd can even react, he lets out a painful yelp. Florine tightly latches her tiny, sharp teeth right onto his ear. She hangs there like a rabid squirrel as Gerd screams, desperately trying to shake her off. He violently thrashes around, cursing the little brat as blood trickles down his cheek. He finally manages to grab her tail, yelling at her to let go, but Florine refuses, shouting back that he started the fight. John panics, desperately begging both of them to let go before someone gets seriously injured. The chefs watch in pure horror as the tiny furball and the royal prince engage in a totally barbaric wrestling match on the kitchen floor. Gerd screams in pain as she bites down harder, and suddenly a cold voice echoes through the room, ordering them to stop instantly. Raeliana pushes up his glasses, staring down at the absolute chaos unfolding in the kitchen. With a heavy sigh, he orders both of them to follow him to his office. Later, a maid carefully finishes wrapping bandages around Gerd's heavily bitten ear. Sitting in the aide office, Gerd looks completely miserable as Raeliana scolds them for engaging in such a ridiculous physical altercation. Gerd furiously points at Florine, screaming that the thing made him look like this and threatening to report the entire incident to his father. The estate doctor calmly reports that while they both have some nasty scratches, nothing is permanently damaged. Relieved, Raeliana asks the doctor to give them a moment alone, but she gently asks him not to be too harsh on the kids. She leaves the room, fully expecting a massive lecture. Once the door shuts, Raeliana's demeanor completely shifts. He coldly demands to hear the full story of what happened. Florine sweats nervously, noticing the dangerous glint in the aide's glasses. John quickly steps forward to explain, but Raeliana stops him, wanting to hear it directly from the two troublemakers. Florine realizes this is a trap. Gerd is definitely going to play the innocent victim, and if she loses this argument, John and the cooks will take the fall. She knows she needs to completely hijack the narrative before the prince can open his mouth. Gerd crosses his arms, arrogantly demanding why he should explain anything to a mere aide when he could just report to the family head. Raeliana coldly reminds the young master that the head is incredibly busy, but Gerd snaps back that as a blood relative, he has every right to interrupt. Ignoring the prince's tantrum, Raeliana turns to the heavily bandaged furball, asking if she has anything to say. Florine puts on her best act, drooling pathetic little tears as she apologizes for causing a commotion by biting his tail. Raeliana nods, seemingly satisfied that she understands her mistake. He begins a long, harsh lecture, stating that succumbing to animal instincts is barbaric and completely beneath humans. But Florine bravely interrupts, asking why someone who should know better would act so terribly. She violently points at Gerd, accusing him of throwing away the pudding. Raeliana raises an eyebrow, asking her exactly what she means. Florine enthusiastically prepares to throw the prince completely under the bus. She details how Gerd cruelly threw the hardworking cooks, putting straight into the trash right in front of her. Pompom, who has miraculously survived the fight covered in tiny band-aids, suddenly rolls forward, translating her angry squeaks perfectly. Florine realizes the golem's translation function must have turned on during the fight, giving her the ultimate advantage. With the entire kitchen staff as witnesses, she uses Pompom to proudly replay the exact, arrogant words Gerd screamed before the fight even started. Florine practically jumps out of her skin, completely shocked that Pompom actually had a recording function this whole time. As Pompom loudly plays back Gerd's threat to lock her in a tower forever, the prince's face goes completely pale. Raeliana slowly looks up, his glasses flashing dangerously as he addresses the young master. With a chilling glare, the aide demands to know exactly what on earth Gerd was thinking. But Gerd stubbornly refuses to back down, stomping his foot and screaming that this entire thing is completely absurd. He aggressively points at Florine, desperately claiming that the recording is totally fabricated. Just then, John the Knight formally steps forward, declaring that the recording is 100% real and he witnessed the whole thing. Florine happily snacks on a cookie while perched on the desk, thinking this is an incredibly satisfying development. She pats Pompom on his bandaged little head, thanking the tiny golem for a job well done. Realizing he's losing, Gerd violently points at Pompom, screaming that he was the real victim because he was brutally attacked by a spirit. Rafgern's eyes narrow as he realizes Gerd used the sacred Lichenvium spirit to attack a helpless child. Gerd violently bursts into tears, whining that she laughed at him first and demanding to know why he's the only one getting scolded. Rafgern snaps, furiously lecturing the prince that attacking Drivlane's daughter-in-law with a royal spirit could literally spark a massive war between their families. But Gerd is completely delusional, crying that there shouldn't be any consequences for punishing a lowly albino. Rafgern and John stare at the crying brat, totally disgusted by how reckless and spoiled he is. Suddenly, a heavy presence fills the room and the family head himself steps through the door. Florine gasps, realizing Caraxes is right behind him, looking totally exhausted. The head strokes his beard, dangerously asking his son how they should handle this massive commotion. Florine knows she needs to deliver the final blow right now before Gerd can spin another lie. She dramatically throws herself at the head, fake crying and pointing at her tiny, bandaged tail. Gerd grinds his teeth, furious at the cunning little beast, but Florine smirks. He completely overlooked one crucial detail. The head ignores his grandson and immediately kneels down to comfort his tiny, crying daughter-in-law. He gently inspects her bandages, asking in a soft voice if she's hurt anywhere else. Florine demands a hug first, and the head warmly picks her up, fully indulging her spoiled act. Once she's secure in his arms, Florine secretly smudges a tiny bit of blood onto the head's incredibly expensive shirt. Staring at him with massive, teary eyes, she begs him not to be hurt. Nuzzling into his chest, she innocently cries that if Grandpa is sick, the entire Drivlane family will be sick too. The head spots the blood on his collar and instantly realizes what the tiny genius is doing. He smiles, knowing this brilliant, manipulative little furball is exactly the kind of talent Drivlane needs. Gerd absolutely loses his mind, screaming at his grandfather not to fall for her trick, pointing to his own bloody ear as proof of her viciousness. But the room suddenly goes dead silent. The head looks down at his grandson with eyes as cold as ice. He bluntly orders Gerd to remain confined to the successor's quarters until he deeply reflects on his massive failure. He adds a brutal final warning. If Gerd disobeys, he will be officially stripped of his successor status and shipped right back to Lichenvium. Gerd collapses to his knees in pure shock. Florine rolls her eyes, thinking it was incredibly dumb for him to threaten Drivlane with his royal bloodline in the first place. Caraxes coldly tells the crying brat that if he loves his home so much, he should just go back there. The head hands Florine over to Caraxes, telling him to take the frightened child back to her room. Safely in Caraxes's arms, Florine happily waves goodbye to the head. The head smiles warmly, watching the little genius leave. He proudly thinks to himself that whoever ends up marrying her is going to be incredibly lucky. Back in the hallway, Caraxes casually uses a teleportation spell, dropping them right outside her bedroom door. Florine looks up at his tired face, secretly wondering if he rushed just so he could check on her faster. He gently places her down, softly telling her to rest since she must be completely exhausted. She admits her tail throbs a bit but says she's fine since Gerd was punished. Caraxes coldly mutters that he wishes the brat had been punished way more. Florine laughs, telling him it's fine because she has absolutely zero intention of marrying Gerd anyway. Caraxes smirks, reassuring her there are plenty of other decent candidates, and Florine eagerly asks when she can meet them. Caraxes sighs, explaining that some of the meetings might have to be seriously delayed. He reveals that one candidate is currently training at a hardcore military academy, which Florine instantly knows must be Dante, Ariadne's direct son. Another is a shark beastman from the Magic Empire's royal family, who has to stay in the palace for his special growth environment. Florine realizes this is Yuri. But when Caraxes mentions the final candidate, he casually waves his hand, completely crossing him off the list and leaving Florine utterly confused. Caraxes explains that since the firstborn crown prince of Lichenvium will give up his succession rights to rule his country, they basically dumped Gerd, the useless second son, on Drivlane. He gently reminds Florine she'll meet the others eventually and tells her to report any trouble immediately, making her wonder why he's suddenly acting so friendly. Caraxes firmly adds that, of course, her bodyguard should step in long before things ever get to that point. Suddenly, he casually mentions that John is going to be severely disciplined for completely failing to protect her today. Florine panics, aggressively asking why John is getting punished when he did exactly what he was supposed to do. Refusing to let her favorite bear knight take the fall, she fiercely double-taps Pompum to use his translation magic. Using the golem, she boldly tells Caraxes that it's impossible for a mere bodyguard to physically beat down an official heir. She argues that John actually did draw his sword to protect her, which is already a massive risk that could have gotten him executed. She glares at Caraxes, stating it's completely unfair to blame the knight for not acting when Caraxes himself never gave him the authority to strike royalty. Caraxes stares down at her in silence, his expression unreadable as she stands her ground. Florine crosses her tiny paws, firmly asking him if he really thinks his punishment is fair. After a long pause, Caraxes softly mutters that the more he looks at her, the more alike they are. Florine blinks, asking what he said, but he just smiles, shaking his head and saying it was nothing. He finally relents, asking if she really wants to spare John. She absolutely screams yes, demanding to know what the knight even did wrong. Caraxes actually chuckles, telling her to calm down and agreeing to drop the punishment. Florine is totally stunned, realizing she's never actually seen the cold-hearted villain laugh like that before. He taps her little head, revealing the real reason he brought her to her new room is because he has something important to tell her. He explains that starting tomorrow, her official lessons will begin, but that's not the big news. Caraxes smirks, dropping a massive bombshell. He finally found a way to give her a proper, noble status. He explains he found someone willing to be her adoptive mother, but there's a tiny catch. Florine completely freaks out, yelling that getting an official noble status is practically impossible. She reminds him she's literally just a random albino girl, totally overwhelmed by how far he's going to make her part of the family. Fidgeting nervously, she finally voices the massive question that's been bothering her this whole time. She looks up at his handsome face, genuinely confused as to why he lied to everyone and called her a saintess just to protect her. From giving her a lavish room to gifting her a rare magic golem, she just can't understand why the ultimate villain is treating her so well. He even arranged elite lessons and an adoptive noble mother for her. Caraxes simply smiles down at her, not saying a word. He explains that the woman willing to adopt her is currently living in deep seclusion in the Yantarosa Mountains, meaning they have to travel there to find her. Florine shrieks, remembering from the novel that the Yantarosa Mountains are incredibly dangerous, formed from a dragon's petrified body where most magic completely fails. She frantically waves her paws, telling Caraxes it's way too dangerous for him to travel there just for her. Caraxes actually teases her, asking if she's worried about him, which only makes her panic more. He sits calmly on the bed, confused as to why she's getting so worked up over a simple adoption trip. Florine stares at him, her mind completely racing. Why is the villain acting like a protective father? She takes a step back, suspiciously asking if there's something he secretly wants from her. To her, surviving in a villain's lair means absolutely nothing comes for free. She remembers a dark moment from the novel, where a young Caraxes learned the harsh lesson that everything in Drivlane comes with a steep price. A flashback shows a creepy relative holding out a glowing magic stone, trying to lure a young Caraxes away after his parents died. The relative sinisterly smirked, clearly plotting to steal the young boy's massive inheritance. Florine knows Caraxes learned early on that kindness always has an ulterior motive. She nervously fiddles with her paws, terrified that this overwhelming kindness is just a trap that will completely ruin her. She knows if she gets too comfortable, her inevitable downfall will be a million times more miserable. She thinks it would honestly be way less stressful if he just admitted he was using her for some evil master plan. Suddenly, Caraxes softly mutters that maybe he's doing it because she resembles her. Before she can ask what he means, he brushes it off, casually claiming it's only natural for him to cherish his collection. Florine totally deadpans, bluntly reminding him she isn't a collectible pet, she's technically his daughter-in-law. Caraxes smiles softly, asking if she's still wondering why he hasn't kicked her out or exposed her fake identity. He leans in and tells her it's simply because he wants to, totally short-circuiting her logical brain. She sighs, remembering that in the original story, Caraxes literally practiced forbidden dark magic just because he was bored, so there's zero point looking for logic with this guy. He gently pats her little head, firmly telling her that no matter what anyone says, she is officially the Drivlane daughter-in-law. Florine looks up, incredibly touched as she realizes he actually noticed she was worried and went out of his way to reassure her. Caraxes warmly tells Florine that she has absolutely nothing else to worry about. He strokes her tiny tummy, urging her to just rest after such a long day. He tucks her in with a soft blanket, wishing her a good night's sleep, but Florine furiously objects. She points out the giant windows, screaming internally that it is still broad daylight outside. Ignoring her protests, Caraxes casually turns to leave, telling her to rest comfortably. Florine desperately calls out for him to wait. Peeking over the blanket, she nervously asks for clarification. She's not officially his daughter-in-law yet, right? He pauses and confirms that to be officially recognized, she still needs the final approval of the Duchess. He casually mentions that his mother has been in deep seclusion for an entire year, so meeting her right away will be difficult, but he assures her she'll be fine soon and tells her to go to sleep. The door clicks shut, leaving Florine wide awake. A year ago, she realizes that's exactly when his sister Ariadne tragically died. She recalls the novel's lore about Inanna Abigail Drivelaine, the 18th Duchess and legendary Earth Spirit Mage. Inanna was a breathtakingly beautiful woman and the loving mother of both Caraxes and Ariadne. The book explicitly stated that the Duchess locked herself away, completely broken by the unimaginable grief of losing her genius daughter. Florine realizes that right now, the Duchess is probably the last person who wants to think about welcoming a new daughter-in-law. She decides to play it smart and lay low, vowing not to do anything unnecessary that might upset the grieving mother. The next day, a giant globe spins in her room as a formal voice introduces itself. Rafiern, the Owl Beastkin aide, formally introduces himself as Baron Rafiern Gervais, officially in charge of her intense daughter-in-law lessons. Pushing up his glasses, he coldly asks how she's feeling today. But before she can answer, he answers for her, stating she looks perfectly fine since she managed to sleep straight through the entire day. Without wasting another second, Rafiern declares the start of her first lesson. He begins by explaining that the Drivelaines operate on a strict meritocracy, completely abolishing the traditional hereditary system, meaning if you don't contribute, you get nothing. He warns her that a true Drivelaine member must always be greedy and possess the cunning of a master schemer. Once they choose a prey, they always go for the kill. Florine nervously flips her book, relieved that the lesson is intensely realistic instead of just telling her to be humble and kind. Rafiern suddenly pulls an object from his coat, stating it's an absolute necessity when discussing the Drivelaine family. He places a beautifully crafted, ornate gun right on the desk. He explains it's a revolutionary new weapon designed by Caraxes himself, capable of converting raw eculaes into highly destructive bullets. Spinning the gun flawlessly in his hand, Rafiern declares it the most important product of the Drivelaine estate, casually mentioning she'll have to learn to shoot it later. Florine's eyes sparkle with excitement, totally thrilled at the idea of learning how to blast things with a magic gun. But Rafiern immediately shuts her down, stating the Drivelaines strictly prohibit gun education for anyone under 10 years old, and since they don't know her age, she's banned for now. Seeing her droop in disappointment, Rafiern sighs and offers to at least show her an old-style bullet for the experience, warning her not to touch it. He pours black powder from a pouch. Florine sniffs it, noting it smells strongly of cinnamon and wondering if Beastkin wouldn't detect that easily. Rafiern proudly replies that Caraxes's new magic bullets solved that exact problem. Florine raises her paw, asking a serious question about the family's future. She points out that since spring has officially arrived, the war will inevitably end soon. And when peace comes, won't their massive weapon sales completely plummet? Rafiern smirks, adjusting his glasses, highly amused that she thinks the end of a war means the end of weapon sales. He leans in and asks her what else she thinks weapons are used for besides launching attacks. Florine thinks for a second before proudly declaring that weapons are also used for defense and protection. Rafiern nods, explaining that Drivelaine will pivot to selling to those who want to prepare for war as a precaution, continuing their monopoly. Furthermore, he states that as the era of swords ends, learning to shoot will become a basic refinement for all nobles, using Drivelaine guns naturally. He stares down at the tiny furball, a genuine smile breaking across his normally stoic face. Florine is completely shocked, realizing the terrifying aide actually looks happy. Rafiern warmly praises her, stating that since she already perfectly grasps the Drivelaines' ruthless business plans, the family's future is looking incredibly promising. Florine wiggles with joy, realizing she and this villainous family are an absolute match made in heaven. She even imagines herself dual-wielding pistols. Rafiern taps the desk, announcing it's time for the final, most crucial lesson of the day. He slides a massive, detailed parchment across the table. It's the official Drivelaine family tree. He explains that they need to review all the official heirs, or in other words, carefully analyze all of her potential husband candidates. However, he notes that out of the entire tree, only 3 specific heirs are actually allowed to enter the main house, making her job a lot easier. Florine cheers, thrilled that she only has to plan strategies against 3 specific targets. But Rafiern adjusts his glasses, warning her there is one massive, immediate problem. He bluntly reveals that, based purely on current political standing, the most likely candidate to win, is Lord Gerd. Florine's jaw literally hits the floor. The spoiled brat she just brutally bit is the frontrunner. She clutches her head in absolute panic, realizing this means she's going to have to constantly watch her back until that kid is completely eliminated from the running. Raeliana coldly advises her that if she wants him gone, she needs to craft a ruthless scheme. He warns that since Gerd has the fragile pride of a prince, he will inevitably act out of spite and cause massive trouble very soon. Florine realizes she absolutely needs to kick Gerd out before he can cause any real damage. She nervously asks Raeliana what happens if they can't get rid of him. Raeliana casually adjusts his glasses and bluntly suggests that tomorrow's meal might end up poisoned. Florine completely freaks out, but Raeliana quickly reassures her, saying Gerd won't make any major moves while Caraxes is away. He reminds her they still need to find her adoptive stepmother in the dangerous Antiarosa Mountains. Florine freezes in panic, suddenly realizing Caraxes isn't actually here right now to protect her. The scene shifts to a group of shady nobles hiding behind fans, whispering that with Caraxes gone, people who were too scared before might finally make their move against the little saintess. Sweating bullets, Florine envisions her food glowing purple with deadly poison, wondering how on earth she's going to survive until Caraxes gets back. She frantically looks around, realizing the other aide, Keith, is nowhere to be found either. Thankfully, Raeliana steps up, confidently telling her that since he's her assigned tutor, he'll personally guide her through this dangerous political minefield. He turns to the chalkboard, explaining that their nation, the Magocracy and Gerd's kingdom of Rechenbium have been strong allies for a very long time. He draws a diagram showing how Rechenbium provides crucial military supplies, acting as the main support keeping the aggressive Holy Empire in check. Because of this massive alliance, Raeliana warns that they can't just strip Lord Gerd of his successor status without a very good reason. Plus, Gerd is highly talented, meaning he'll easily pass the initial selections. Raeliana's face darkens as he explains that the kings of Rechenbium have always ruled with extreme arrogance, historically using albinos as easy scapegoats for their problems. Hearing this, Florine shudders, absolutely convinced that Gerd is plotting to take her down. She tightly hugs her own face, nervously asking Raeliana exactly how they're supposed to completely remove the spoiled prince. Raeliana smirks, revealing that there is one guaranteed way to get rid of him. He explains she must earn a massive amount of merit, which will officially grant her the right to choose the next heir herself. Since 10 candidates are way too many to manage, earning this right would allow Lady Florine to immediately eliminate half the competition. Raeliana states that if she accomplishes something truly undeniable, the head of the house will have no choice but to grant her this immense power. He leans in closely, testing her resolve by asking if she's unsure she can pull it off. Florine aggressively pumps her little paw, fiercely declaring she'll definitely earn the right. Raeliana smiles proudly, telling the young lady he genuinely looks forward to her performance. But before they move on, Florine nervously admits there's one last thing she's really curious about. She asks what happens if she officially drives Gerd out, but he violently refuses to accept the outcome and rebels. Raeliana casually explains that those who fail the succession battle are given the rank of border duke, and they're even allowed to send their own children to compete for the throne later. Florine nods, realizing that since their bloodline still has a chance, the losers don't usually fight back too hard. Raeliana closes his eyes, admitting that historically, some incredibly stubborn heirs did reject tradition and try to violently take the seat by force. But he quickly reassures her that the family employs specialized mediators who step in and violently handle any conflicts, so she doesn't need to worry. He adds that the losers often receive key, high-paying positions within the family anyway, so the vast majority just accept the results and step down peacefully. It turns out everyone highly respects the founding head's vision, forcing the males into a brutal, fierce competition to ensure only the absolute strongest leads House Drivlane. Florine tilts her head, cleverly asking what happens if a daughter is born who is undeniably stronger than all the males combined. Raeliana looks impressed, noting that it's a great mindset to constantly ask questions. He explains that traditionally, only males could ever become the head of the house. However, there was exactly one person who was so incredibly powerful she completely shattered that tradition: Lady Ariadne, Caraxes's late sister. Raeliana shares a legendary story about her. Normally, when the head dies, the designated lady chooses the next leader from the remaining candidates. But Ariadne was so overwhelmingly dominant, every single male candidate voluntarily withdrew. Florine is absolutely amazed, thinking she already knew Ariadne was awesome, but hearing the raw details makes her sound like an absolute boss. Raeliana suddenly checks his pocket watch, realizing he's kept the young lady way too long and needs to leave. Florine desperately digs into her pocket, not wanting him to go empty-handed after he spent so much time helping her. She hands him a single, neatly wrapped caramel candy. Smiling brightly, she tells him that since he helped her so much today, she's giving him her absolute favorite treat. Raeliana stares at the tiny candy, deeply touched. He notes that the true value of a gift is relative, meaning this single caramel must be incredibly precious to the little beastkin. Smiling warmly, he officially accepts the gift, declaring that he, Raeliana, will never forget the immense value of this tiny caramel. Florine happily waves goodbye as the aide steps out, letting him know she'll pass his message on to John the Knight. Once alone, Florine slams her tiny paws on the desk, declaring it's officially time to draft her master-successor management plan. But to do that, she realizes she needs to fully memorize every single face on the massive Drivlane family tree. She notices Caraxus's branch is completely empty, assuming it's because he strictly adheres to his vow of chastity. Then she looks under Ariadne's branch and completely freezes, spotting something that makes zero sense. She clearly recognizes Dante and Yuri's portraits, but there's a third child listed under Ariadne named Ian. Staring at the unknown name, Florine gets an incredibly bad, intimidating feeling about this mysterious heir. The next day, Florine is carried down the hall by her caracal nanny, Evangeline, nervously wondering why the Grand Madam suddenly summoned her. Trembling in the nanny's arms, she's terrified the Duchess will take one look at her, decide she hates her, and violently throw her out on the street. Evangeline gently tries to calm her down, suggesting the Duchess probably just wants to politely say hello, but Florine continues to panic about getting rejected. Evangeline insists there's no way the Duchess will reject her, especially since they dressed her up so beautifully for the meeting. The nanny suddenly stops in her tracks, completely freezing in front of a massive, imposing set of double doors. Evangeline's face turns deadly serious as she warns Florine that the Duchess is in incredibly poor health, begging her not to do anything that might cause an upset. The grand doors swing open, and Evangeline carefully carries Florine into the Grand Madam's chambers. Florine is immediately blown away by a massive, stunning crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Looking around, she notices every single piece of furniture and ornament is completely extravagant and flawlessly elegant. But as she takes in the breathtaking room, a strange chill goes down her spine. Even though this is her first time here, the entire place feels unsettlingly familiar. Evangeline formally announces their arrival, respectfully stating she's brought the guest the madam requested. A pale, slender hand gracefully lowers a teacup as a soft voice acknowledges Caraxus's new guest. Evangeline respectfully bows, carefully offering up the tiny furball to the Grand Madam. The 18th Duchess, Inanna Abigail Drivlane, smiles warmly. She tells the tiny beastkin to drop the formalities and just call her Inanna. Inanna apologizes for the delay, explaining she was completely unconscious until yesterday and wanted to meet her the moment she woke up. Sensing the Duchess's incredibly gentle aura, Florine immediately relaxes, realizing the fearsome magic user is actually way kinder than she expected. Inanna turns to the caracal nanny, softly noting that it's been a very long time since they last saw each other. A painful sadness crosses the Duchess's face, as she admits she never imagined things would turn out like this after Evangeline finished raising little Ariadne. Florine realizes that Evangeline wasn't just a random nanny. She was actually the late Lady Ariadne's personal caretaker. Inanna correctly guesses that Evangeline is now officially in charge of caring for Florine. The Duchess gently asks Florine if she understands exactly why the family head assigned Evangeline to her. Inanna explains that Evangeline practically raised Ariadne from birth, staying fiercely loyal by her side even when she became the acting head of the family. The Duchess smiles softly, revealing that by giving her Evangeline, the head basically handed Florine the entire political faction that used to support his beloved daughter. Florine is absolutely floored, realizing the massive political power she's just been handed on a silver platter. She finally understands why the other nobles are starting to panic. The family head is subtly showing everyone exactly where his true favor lies. Florine deeply bows her tiny head, loudly declaring she is truly honored and will do everything in her power to live up to that immense trust. Inanna chuckles, clearly impressed that the tiny furball instantly grasped the heavy political subtext. She slides a plate of intricate cookies forward. Florine sniffs them, totally clueless about the etiquette of eating in front of a duchess. Inanna watches her nibble the cookie, noting that it must be incredibly frustrating for such a brilliant child to be trapped in an animal form. Florine droops, sadly admitting that no matter how hard she tries, she literally can't feel a single drop of magical equalize in her body. But the Duchess smiles, revealing that equalize exists absolutely everywhere in the air. She promises that once Florine learns to gather it from the environment, taking a human form is definitely possible. Inanna warmly offers to find her a specialized teacher who can show her exactly how to sense the magic. The Duchess gently tells Florine that as long as she's feeling well, she's welcome to visit and ask questions anytime. Florine nods, but her heart absolutely aches seeing such a kind, elegant woman suffering so deeply. Looking into Inanna's sad eyes, Florine thinks she can't even begin to imagine the crushing pain of losing a child. Suddenly, a violent flashback hits Florine. She sees a younger Inanna standing next to teenage Ariadne, pointing excitedly at a blooming tree. Florine gasps, her tiny body trembling as the random memory completely blindsides her. Inanna leans forward in concern, asking what's wrong as the furball starts hyperventilating. The cookie crumbles from Florine's paws as she desperately tries to process the vivid hallucination. The memory felt insanely real, like she had literally seen it with her own two eyes. In the vision, Ariadne formally says goodbye, telling her mother to stay healthy. A younger Caraxes steps up, holding his sister's hands. He reminds her this is their final war, demanding she return safely so they can spend time with their mother. Ariadne smiles softly and promises. The memory shifts violently. The Duchess is screaming in pure raw agony, ripping at her own hair in the dark as she begs to be taken instead of her dead child. Florine looks up at the crystal chandelier, finally realizing exactly why the room felt so familiar. This lavish bedroom is the exact place where her soul first possessed a body in this world. She stares at her tiny paws in absolute shock, remembering that she literally witnessed the Duchess's complete mental breakdown from a corner of this very room. Her tiny heart hammers in her chest as even more suppressed memories violently flood into her brain. In another memory, Caraxes stands in a glowing room next to his sister, holding a glowing magical artifact. Ariadne happily calls out to her mother, showing off a special video recording stone she finally found. Caraxes smirks, noting that their mother is going to be completely surprised when she sees the recording later. Ariadne holds up a glowing, magical blue dice, suggesting they safely store it inside the stone for now. Caraxes looks worried, urging his sister to take the dice with her, stating it could literally save her life if she gets seriously injured on the front lines. But Ariadne stubbornly refuses, arguing they shouldn't recklessly rely on an untested magical item, even if rumors claim it can amplify Eculize by 10 times. She looks at the dice with a heavy expression, warning her brother that powerful magic like that always comes with a terrifying, unpredictable price. In the flashback, Caraxes argues that they've been chasing these magical dice for ages, and they've only managed to secure 3 of them. He urgently warns Ariadne that the Holy Empire bastards are hunting for the dice too, and if they lose this artifact on the battlefield, the war will quickly turn against them. Ariadne finally concedes, asking Caraxes where he plans to hide it. Caraxes hums, noting they need a spot their mom will eventually find, but also a place she'd never throw away. He decides the perfect hiding spot is the vanity table their dad made as a wedding gift, revealing it actually has a secret compartment built inside. Ariadne is completely surprised, and Caraxes smugly reveals he secretly built the compartment himself without telling their mother. Ariadne smiles, making Caraxes promise not to show their mother the secret until she discovers it herself someday. Caraxes agrees, and Ariadne affectionately calls him a good little brother. Caraxes reaches toward the vanity, ready to secure the precious artifact. As he slides it into the hidden slot, he softly hopes their mother will find it safely when the time is right. Suddenly, the vision shatters. Florine wakes up gasping for air, instantly surrounded by the worried faces of Inanna and Evangeline. Florine frantically looks around, completely disoriented, as Inanna gently explains she laid her down on her own bed after she suddenly lost consciousness. The Duchess looks deeply concerned, noting the doctor said she was physically fine, making her sudden collapse completely baffling. Florine rubs her head, her mind absolutely spinning. What on earth was that hyper-realistic memory? But more importantly, if that vision was real, she absolutely has to tell Lady Inanna about the hidden dice. Florine quickly hops up and points a tiny paw toward the vanity, acting totally shocked and exclaiming that a spot over there is suddenly sparkling. She scrambles across the furniture, insisting she saw something glittering right as she woke up. Evangeline panics, warning the young lady that she's climbing on the Duchess's personal belongings. Ignoring the nanny, Florine hits the secret compartment, and the beautiful, glowing video stone rolls right out onto the floor. Florine stares at it, secretly disappointed. The vision definitely showed a magic dice in there too, and she was really hoping the dice's power would finally let her transform into a human. But Evangeline doesn't care about the dice. She immediately picks up the stone and hands it to the Duchess, totally shocked that it popped out of the vanity. Inanna's eyes widen in pure disbelief, staring at the secret compartment and the glowing stone she never knew existed. Her hands tremble violently as she reaches out, knowing exactly who must have left this behind. The stone activates and a beautiful, glowing hologram of Ariadne projects into the room. The recording starts with Ariadne brightly saying, "You finally found it." Inanna immediately breaks down, clutching her chest as a raw, heartbroken sob tears from her throat. She collapses to her knees, completely overwhelmed by seeing her late daughter's face again. In the recording, Ariadne smiles warmly, calling them mom and dad for the very first time. She asks if they were surprised by the hidden message. She rubs her neck shyly, admitting she realized she never actually told them how much she loved them, so she decided to leave this video. Ariadne speaks softly, acknowledging that she and Caraxes were born during incredibly difficult times for the family. She guesses that's exactly why their parents showered them with such overwhelming love. The projection flickers as Ariadne addresses her mother's constant fear of her leaving for the brutal front lines of the war. She proudly declares that fighting is the absolute best thing she can do as a driveling. She gently asks that if anything ever happens to her, they view it as a sacrifice for the family's honor. But she quickly brightens up, promising to stay by their side for as long as she possibly can, urging her parents to live long enough to see Caraxes grow up and have kids of his own. With a final, radiant smile, Ariadne looks directly into the camera. "I love you, Mom, Dad," she says softly before the recording finally fades out. The family head, who had rushed into the room during the commotion, gently holds the crying Duchess. He tearfully mutters that Ariadne was such an unfilial child for leaving this behind and dying before her old parents. He pulls his sobbing wife into a tight embrace, burying his face in her shoulder as she desperately cries out that she misses her daughter so much. He gently strokes her hair, telling her to cry as much as she needs to, knowing she's lived the past year pretending to have no emotions at all. He holds her tightly, whispering that letting her emotions out is exactly what their little girl would have wanted. Evangeline stands quietly in the background, clutching Florine to her chest. Florine watches the heartbroken parents, genuinely hoping this message finally lightens Lady Inanna's heavy burden. After the emotional breakdown, the head turns to Florine, gently asking if she was really the one who found the hidden stone. Florine nods nervously. The head is amazed, noting that even he had absolutely no idea the secret compartment existed, and asks how she possibly knew it was there. Florine lies through her teeth, claiming she suddenly saw it sparkling with magic. The head strokes his beard, highly impressed, assuming she must possess some latent magical talent to see the stone's hidden aura. But he quickly dismisses the detail, telling her it doesn't matter how she found it. His eyes well up with tears again as he thanks her for giving them such an incredible gift, the final message from their daughter telling them to keep living. The head looks at Florine with immense gratitude, promising to grant her any wish she desires as a massive reward. Inanna smiles softly at her, waiting to hear the little beastkin's request. But Florine shakes her head, politely asking if she can save the wish for later since she needs time to think about it. The head warmly agrees, telling her to take all the time she needs. Florine gives a happy squeak, promising to come right back the moment she decides. Back in her room, Florine sighs heavily, resting her chin on her paws. She admits she totally thought she'd instantly cash in a favor like that to secure her spot as the heir chooser. But seeing the head and Lady Inanna having such a deeply raw, emotional moment over Ariadne, she realized bringing up her own selfish political agenda right then would have been completely heartless. She knows they just wanted to stay wrapped up in those precious final memories of their daughter for a little while longer. A wave of deep sadness suddenly hits her. She stares blankly, wishing that just once in her many miserable lives, she had a real family who would actually mourn her death like that. But she quickly wipes a stray tear from her eye, scolding herself for getting emotional. She tells herself she's already being treated way kinder than she actually deserves in this villainous household. Florine tightly grips her blankets, reminding herself that if she lets every emotional moment get to her, she'll never survive in this cutthroat world. The scene jumps back to her lesson with Rafiern. He explains that while albinos struggling to transform is common, history shows they can naturally achieve humanization. A horrifying mental image flashes in Florine's mind of being locked in a cage with giant shadow leopards as Rafiern casually mentions that extreme, life-threatening situations can trigger the transformation. Rafiern pushes up his glasses, stating that enduring intense, life-threatening stress is statistically one of the most effective methods. Florine freezes in absolute terror as he calmly reveals that the elders actually suggested throwing her into the leopard cage to force her transformation. But she immediately praises the heavens when Rafiern adds that the family head flat out rejected the insane idea, refusing to endanger his precious new daughter. Instead, Raffiern states that, per Lady Inanna's advice, they will focus on teaching her how to properly sense eculize. He promises to draft a new, safer training schedule. Florine flashes back to Inanna's gentle promise to find her a special teacher who can guide her magical training. Snapping back to the present, she looks around the massive, empty classroom, realizing it's just her and Raffiern. Where is this mysterious new teacher? She glances down at Pompom, who is still completely covered in bandages, noting that the little golem is her only company right now. Raffiern awkwardly coughs, admitting there's a slight problem with the classroom setup, so today's actual magic lesson has to be postponed. He promises to contact her once the new schedule is finalized, but before she leaves, he asks if he can borrow Pompom for a bit. Florine hesitates, protectively hugging her favorite gadget, but eventually hands him over, warning Raffiern he absolutely has to return it. Raffiern smiles warmly, assuring her he'll personally deliver the golem back to her room. Walking back to her quarters, Florine thinks the delay might actually be a blessing in disguise, giving her extra time to figure out what massive reward she wants to ask the head for. She happily waves goodbye to Raffiern, completely oblivious to what's about to happen. As soon as she's gone, Raffiern's warm smile instantly vanishes. He glares at the corner of the room, coldly asking who gave the intruder permission to sit in on his private class. Caraxes suddenly drops his invisibility spell, casually leaning against the bookcase. He smirks, claiming he just had to see how his new daughter-in-law was doing. Raffiern violently snaps, yelling at Caraxes that just because he wants to check on her doesn't mean he can almost blow up an entire mountain range or burn down the forest in his rush to get back. Caraxes clicks his tongue, annoyed. He threatens that if Raffiern rats him out to Florine, he'll just summon every single snow leopard in the area to cause maximum chaos. Raffiern sighs in defeat, pinching the bridge of his nose. He promises to keep his mouth shut, begging the young master to just resolve his issues peacefully. Caraxes smirks, telling the aide he'll contact him later, and immediately teleports away. He reappears in a freezing, snow-covered forest, looking around the desolate landscape. He notes that the person he's looking for still hasn't shown up. Caraxes sighs, realizing getting out here was a massive hassle, but he knows Florine absolutely needs the support of the powerful Idaho family to solidify her standing. He knows that if a fiercely loyal and respected figure like Lord Idaho backs her, none of the other nobles will ever dare look down on the little albino. Caraxes is confident that once Lord Idaho sees Florine, he'll change his mind and return to the estate. Suddenly, a massive, majestic snow leopard emerges from the blizzard. Caraxes smiles, recognizing the man who remained fiercely loyal to Ariadne, now wandering the wilderness without a purpose. Caraxes addresses the giant beast, telling him it's time to come back and see what Lady Ariadne left behind. Back at the estate, two maids gossip excitedly as they clean the hallways. The entire mansion is buzzing with the massive rumor that the tiny albino miraculously found Lady Ariadne's hidden gift. One maid marvels at how much the young lady has accomplished in such an incredibly short time. She admits she was highly suspicious at first, but now she firmly believes Florine might actually be a real saintess. In the kitchen, the chefs are happily hauling massive sacks of flour, absolutely thrilled that the dark, depressing atmosphere of the mansion has completely vanished since Florine arrived. They passionately declare her their savior, highly motivated to prepare the ultimate welcoming banquet in her honor. Meanwhile, Linda bursts into Florine's room, excitedly announcing that the banquet decorations are finally finished and holding up a mirror for her. Florine stares at her reflection, completely speechless. She's dressed in a stunning, custom-made pink gown with delicate frills and a massive jewel bow. She looks absolutely adorable, and she sincerely thanks Linda for putting so much effort into making her look like a true noble. Linda blushes, bashfully admitting she actually spent the entire morning forcing Florine to try on dozens of outfits just because she looked so incredibly cute in all of them. Since there's still a bit of time before the grand banquet begins, Linda suggests taking a relaxing walk with John to clear her head. Florine happily agrees, eager to get some fresh air after the stressful morning. As Linda rushes out to grab John, Florine wiggles with pure joy. A massive, luxurious banquet thrown entirely for her, she could never have imagined something this amazing. But across the estate, Gerd violently slams his teacup down, absolutely seething with jealousy. He screams, demanding to know why everyone is fussing over a worthless albino. Remembering how casually she dismissed him in the kitchen, his royal pride is completely shattered. How dare she call him an idiot and say there are better candidates? He fiercely punches his desk, yelling that his swordsmanship and pedigree are infinitely superior to the other brats, bragging that he even dropped out of elite night school just to take over Drivlane. But now, because of some insignificant, tiny creature, his perfect image is completely ruined. He recalls how the other bastard candidates have started subtly ignoring and mocking him in the hallways ever since the kitchen incident. A sinister, cloaked figure steps out of the shadows, smoothly asking if His Highness thinks it's fair that he's being treated so disrespectfully. The cloaked man smirks wickedly, whispering that the people who humiliated him absolutely must not be forgiven. He asks Gerd if they should proceed with the plan. Gerd's eyes flash with pure malice. He firmly agrees, eager to get his brutal revenge on the little saintess. He asks the cloaked man to confirm if all the dark preparations were made in absolute secret, and the shadowy figure guarantees that not a single piece of evidence was left behind. Meanwhile, the cloaked assassin assures Gerd that his secret is safe, confirming the queen read his letter and no one knows he infiltrated the estate. He proposes a completely unhinged plan: blow up another heir's residence with Gerd nearby so the prince looks like a victim and dodges all suspicion. He warns Gerd to get to a crowded area before the time bomb detonates to secure his alibi. Gerd smirks, totally on board, and tells the assassin to handle the rest while he preps for the banquet. He slips away, mentally dedicating this absolutely toxic scheme to Rechenbium. Outside in the snow, Linda points out something in the distance. A group of guards spots John walking with the rumored young lady nestled in his hood. The knights immediately swarm them, teasing John for being a lucky dog to guard someone so adorable. Linda playfully chimes in, telling the knights to fire John and call her if he ever messes up. Florine giggles from inside John's coat, absolutely loving the attention. John gets completely defensive, grumbling that they're making her uncomfortable as he abruptly stomps off. He sighs, admitting the other guards are just jealous because they want to pet her soft fur. He looks down at her with a gentle smile. Florine blushes, genuinely asking if she's really that pretty. She admits she feels insecure since everyone else is a majestic beastman, while she's just a tiny, powerless albino. John looks shocked, immediately reassuring her that she's ridiculously adorable. He explains that adult beastmen naturally find younger ones cute, and anyone bullying her for being an albino is just a straight-up weirdo. Florine thinks about it, realizing it makes perfect sense since humans also find babies cute. John stops, noticing she's still bothered by her inability to transform into a human. He drops some secret lore, explaining that most beastman babies actually struggle with humanization early on. He reveals that mastering it at an early age is incredibly rare, and only absolute monsters from dominant alpha families can pull it off. Florine lets out a huge sigh of relief. Seeing the elite drivlings made her anxious, but knowing it's normal to be slow takes a massive weight off her shoulders. She thanks John with a bright smile, feeling way better. She decides to just chill and live comfortably, confident her human form will unlock eventually. Suddenly, John flinches, his sharp ears picking up a strange noise in the distance. He narrows his eyes at the dense, snowy birch trees, sensing something approaching fast. A shadow falls over his face as he realizes what it is. Telling Florine that something big is going down, he completely locks in and rushes toward the sound. He hides behind a tree, listening as the frantic footsteps get closer. Florine peeks out from his coat just as terrified screams echo through the woods. A group of noble kids completely books it past them, crying their eyes out about a terrifying monster. They shove past John in an absolute panic. John sighs in exhaustion, recognizing the brats and asking if they were fighting again. He scolds them, telling them to hurry up and get ready for the welcome banquet. Florine notices John's voice is completely cold, realizing this definitely isn't the first time these kids have caused trouble. Looking past the fleeing bullies, they spot a young boy slumped against a tree, covered in bruises. John immediately marches over to check on the victim. The boy wipes blood from his lip, his striking red hair completely standing out against the snow. Florine gasps, noting how badly beaten up he is, and John gently insists they take him to the infirmary. She peeks closer, completely mesmerized. She realizes the boy isn't just handsome, he has an incredibly exotic, pretty face that practically glows. John crosses his arms, bluntly asking if the kid got bullied again. The red-haired boy flinches, clearly embarrassed. Florine's brain clicks. She remembers the Drivlane family tree and realizes this gorgeous, beaten-up kid is Ian Drivlane, Ariadne's firstborn son. John offers a hand to help him up so they can get his wounds treated. But Ian stubbornly refuses, desperately begging them not to tell anyone what happened. Suddenly, Florine spots a massive, striped tiger tail swishing out from behind the boy. She realizes Ian is so severely injured that his magic is slipping, making him physically unable to maintain his human form. Knowing it's super dangerous to stay out here like this, Ian tries to act tough. But Florine aggressively grabs him with her tiny paws, fiercely lecturing him that if he doesn't get treated, he'll suffer and those bratty kids will just come back to jump him again. Florine offers Ian a deal. If he really doesn't want to go to the infirmary, she'll lie and say she is sick so the doctor comes directly to their room instead. As Ian hesitates, Florine desperately tries to recall any details about him from the original story, but she draws a complete blank. She remembers that in the second half of the novel, every single heir eventually awakened as a powerful alpha, but she never understood why Ian was completely excluded from being a possible male lead. Looking at the bruised, shivering boy, she realizes she never imagined he was being treated this terribly, especially since he's Lady Ariadne's biological son. Suddenly, Ian takes a defensive stance, his tail swishing aggressively as he tells her to stay back. Florine refuses to let him walk away in this condition. She playfully chases after him, firmly asking if he's coming to her welcome banquet tonight. Trying to bribe him, she promises they're roasting delicious turkey, and if he takes his medicine, she'll even give him a special gift. Seeing him finally react, she ups the ante, offering to literally spank the butts of those bullies if she sees them later. Hoping to lighten the mood, she awkwardly points to the sky, cheerfully yelling about how incredibly nice the weather is. Ian completely deadpans, bluntly asking what's so nice about a freezing, gray blizzard. Florine nervously laughs, realizing her distraction totally failed, and blurts out that he's pretty instead. Ian flinches, totally caught off guard. Suddenly, a sharp, incredibly angry voice rings out from behind them, demanding to know if Ian committed a barbaric act again. Florine groans internally. Things were just starting to go well, and now some random guy is completely ruining the vibe. A severe-looking man in a dark blue suit violently scolds Ian, screaming at him to abandon his savagery if he ever wants to be chosen by the lady of the house. He completely ignores Ian's visible injuries, coldly telling the boy that since he broke his promise, he is banned from the banquet and must report to the punishment room immediately. Florine's blood begins to boil. Who does this guy think he is, punishing Ian without even asking what happened and banning someone from her banquet? John whispers to Florine, identifying the strict man as Weasel, the official etiquette instructor in charge of disciplining the heirs. Florine is completely disgusted. Judging by Ian's terrified reaction, she realizes this definitely isn't the first time the etiquette master has abused his power. Refusing to let some snooty teacher bully Ian, Florine bravely steps forward, fully preparing to intervene. She glares up at Weasel, aggressively asking why he didn't properly greet her first. Weasel looks down at the tiny, fluffy albino in a dress, completely baffled by her sudden attitude. John clears his throat, coldly warning the etiquette master to show some respect and greet the lady properly. Weasel's face instantly shifts into a fake, incredibly exaggerated smile. He claps his hands, completely changing his tune as he formally greets the little saintess. He even playfully pokes fun at John, acting incredibly friendly. However, his smile doesn't reach his eyes, clearly unhappy that Sir Grizzly is actively protecting the albino. He sneers down at Florine, condescendingly calling her little one and mocking the idea of her being the future lady of the house. Florine absolutely seethes with rage. She knows that if she wasn't forcing herself to maintain her saintess persona, she would completely lose her cool. Deciding to fight fire with fire, she summons Pompom the translation golem. Through Pompom's refined speech filter, she aggressively calls out his hypocrisy, asking how an etiquette master doesn't even know basic greeting manners. She fiercely defends Ian, stating he was the one getting bullied by a massive group, so why is he the only one being scolded? Weasel awkwardly backpedals, smoothly apologizing for his outburst and claiming he was just nervous. But he quickly recovers his slimy smirk, telling the young lady there's something she clearly doesn't know about Ian. He points at the trembling boy, coldly revealing that young Master Ian is actually half-blooded from an enemy nation, making him inherently savage. He smugly adds that everyone knows the late Lady Ariadne went to war and brought back a son from the enemy side. Florine is absolutely floored, having no idea about this massive piece of driveling family drama. But she quickly recovers, fiercely arguing that Ian's mother is still Lady Ariadne, the greatest hero of driveling. Weasel aggressively shakes his head, arguing that treating a half-blood like a true driveling is an insult, since his father could have been a random enemy mercenary. Florine shoots back, demanding to know if he's implying that Lady Ariadne's pure driveling blood is somehow inferior. Weasel instantly stammers, realizing he just walked into a massive trap. Pointing her little paw at the terrified boy, Florine delivers the final blow. She orders Ian to speak up and clearly tell them what really happened in the woods. Ian stares at her in pure shock. With his pride shattered and absolutely no one to trust in this cruel house, staying quiet won't save him anymore. Florine knows this is incredibly hard for the traumatized kid, but he can't let himself be the family punching bag forever. She remembers her past lives, knowing exactly what it feels like to be completely helpless. That's exactly why she promises to stand fiercely by his side so he can find his courage. She firmly tells the sneering etiquette master to listen closely because Ian is no longer alone. She proudly declares that Ian isn't a burden, he is officially her future husband candidate. She tells Ian to come see her tonight, promising to personally speak to the family head so he won't be punished. Ian and Weasel are both completely speechless. Weasel's face turns beet red with fury as he realizes the tiny albino just completely hijacked his authority. Refusing to back down, Florine points her paw directly at the etiquette master. She boldly guarantees, upon her title as the Saintess, that Ian is not just an ordinary child. She screams that Ian is destined to become a powerful alpha. Both Weasel and John stare at the tiny furball in absolute shock, totally stunned by her massive, world-altering prophecy. John and Weasel are completely stunned. They stare at the tiny furball, totally unable to process her insane prophecy that the half-blood brat is going to become a powerful alpha. Weasel's expression darkens as he looks down at Ian, clearly conflicted by the bold prediction. Suddenly, Weasel bursts into mocking laughter, telling Florine that the rumors were right. She really is hilarious. Wiping a fake tear from his eye, he smirks. He tells the Saintess that if Ian truly was worthy of becoming an alpha, he wouldn't be sitting in the snow acting so pathetic right now. He gestures down at the trembling, bruised boy, asking Florine if she honestly believes someone in that sorry state could ever lead House Drivlane. Florine furiously barks back, screaming that no one can overcome everything completely alone without a little help, boldly guaranteeing that Ian will become an alpha. Weasel scoffs internally, annoyed by the noisy little brat. He figures she's just pretending to care about the half-blood to act like a benevolent lady of the house. He lectures her on Drivlane's brutal tradition. They only raise the pups who survive after being thrown off a cliff. He proudly declares that's exactly why he never interferes with what happens in the heirs' quarters, basically admitting he lets the bullying happen. Florine glares at him, absolutely disgusted by his twisted logic. She seriously wants to shut his mouth permanently. But Weasel isn't done. He glances at the massive bear knight, coldly warning Florine that even with Sir John Grizzly protecting her, she won't be able to handle what's coming. He looks back at Ian, maliciously stating that the albino girl won't be able to stay on his side for much longer anyway. With a slimy smile, Weasel tells them he'd actually be happy if Ian miraculously became an alpha, before giving a mock bow. He casually turns around, stating he'll be leaving now, his footsteps crunching in the snow. Florine practically hisses at his retreating back, swearing she's going to make that smug jerk regret everything he just said. Suddenly, Ian quietly speaks up, telling Florine she really didn't need to come out here for him. He wipes his mouth, stubbornly repeating that he didn't need her help and she shouldn't have taken his side. He refuses to meet her eyes, defensively stating he doesn't need her pity. Florine sighs, realizing this traumatized kid is so deep in his edgy phase that he can't even say a simple thank you. She decides to just let it slide for now. But John suddenly speaks up, agreeing with Florine's prophecy. He firmly states that he also believes Ian can become an alpha. Florine wiggles happily, glad John agrees. The knight strokes his chin, noting that based on how Ian handles his magical primavera energy, the boy definitely has immense raw talent. He looks down at Ian with serious eyes, assuring him that this isn't just empty flattery. Ian's eyes widen, but then he bitterly asks why he wasn't allowed to enter the elite military academy like the other heirs if he really had that much potential. Florine looks at the boy, realizing he's been secretly harboring a desperate desire to prove himself at the academy this entire time. Ian quickly shakes his head, turning his back to them and muttering to just forget he said anything. He's about to walk away when John stops him, giving him a warm smile. John tells the young master that thanks to being here today, he finally made a real friend. Florine excitedly throws her paws up in the air, happily declaring that she and Ian are officially besties. She cheerfully hops toward him, demanding a hug to seal their new friendship. Ian completely panics, stepping back and aggressively asking why he would ever hug her. She wiggles closer, telling him not to be shy, but Ian fiercely rejects the offer, his tail swishing defensively. Florine teases him, saying he has to get used to physical affection if they're going to be friends. But as she gets closer, she suddenly stops. She twitches her little pink nose, picking up a very distinct, familiar scent clinging to his clothes. She remembers her lesson with Raeliana, where he showed her the old-style gunpowder that smelled strongly of cinnamon. The scent on Ian is incredibly faint, but her sensitive beastkin nose definitely recognizes the sharp smell of raw gunpowder. She wonders why he smells like explosives when all the shooting classes were explicitly canceled for the banquet today. Suddenly, Ian freezes, his ears twitching nervously as he looks around. He notes that the woods have gone completely, unnervingly quiet. John asks him what's wrong, but Ian shakes his head, assuming it's nothing. But Florine's brain is working in overdrive. The smell of gunpowder, Ian covered in suspicious wounds, Why does this exact scenario feel so incredibly familiar? She stares at the boy, desperately trying to remember where she read about this specific chain of events. She gets super annoyed, violently sniffing the air as the smell of gunpowder suddenly gets much stronger. Is it on his clothes, or is it coming from somewhere else? She looks down at the snow beneath her paws, noticing a faint trail. Her eyes widen in pure horror as the memory finally clicks. She remembers a scene from the novel where an older Gerd is bragging to the original Saintess, outside the beautifully rebuilt heir's wing. The Saintess compliments the stunning architecture, noting she heard it had to be completely rebuilt after a tragic accident. In the book, it was explicitly stated that a massive, devastating explosion occurred in the heir's wing when Gerd was young. The Saintess casually mentions she heard another young heir was caught in the blast and died, calling it a terrible shame. Gerd pretends to look sad, agreeing that it was a tragedy and identifying the dead boy as Ian. The Saintess praises Gerd's kind heart, completely oblivious to the dark truth. She pulls him into a hug, admitting she never really knew Ian anyway. But the novel revealed Gerd's internal monologue, showing he was completely faking his sadness just to look good for her. In a terrifying reveal, Gerd secretly smirks while hugging the Saintess, thinking to himself that she never needs to know he was the one who actually blew up the building. The scene flashes to a brutal memory of young Ian trapped under burning rubble, desperately wishing he had eliminated his enemies when he had the chance. In the present, the Saintess smiles happily, blissfully unaware she's engaged to a literal murderer. Florine gasps, her tiny body trembling as the horrible realization hits her. Gerd was the one who planted the bombs, and right now, Ian is standing directly in the blast zone, about to be completely wrecked. Florine wants to run straight to the family head to report the bombs immediately, but she realizes that if she disarms them early, she won't be able to conclusively prove Gerd is the mastermind behind it. She knows whoever planted the explosives is waiting for something massive to trigger them. She stares at the grand building, trying to figure out how to catch the culprit while absolutely minimizing any damage. Suddenly, loud footsteps echo from down the hall as Gerd throws another massive tantrum. The young prince screams at his cloaked assassin, furious that they're suddenly hosting a banquet in the main hall. He aggressively clenches his fists, complaining that his master plan is falling apart. He only wanted to blow up the heir's wing while everyone was distracted with the main banquet. He admits his twisted goal was to frame the albino girl for the destruction, hoping everyone would blame her and immediately kick her out. But now, because the servants are hosting a stupid treasure hunt, right here in the heir's wing, his entire scheme is ruined. He flashes back to seeing two maids happily carrying a box, gushing about the cute treasure hunt the young lady organized. Peeking from around the corner, Gerd completely panics, realizing that if the servants start ransacking the place for hidden treasure, they'll definitely find his bombs. Turning back to the assassin, Gerd demands that they must recover every single explosive immediately. The assassin nods, agreeing it's the safest option. The assassin begins pulling out the heavy black bombs, starting from the closest hiding spot. But suddenly, he freezes, a look of pure confusion crossing his face as he mutters that they haven't even hidden the treasures yet. Florine casually steps into view, perched comfortably on John's head. She asks aloud why someone is already starting the treasure hunt. The assassin absolutely flinches, realizing he's been caught holding a live explosive. Florine glares down from her bodyguard's head, completely locking the traitor in her sights. The assassin recognizes her instantly. Cursing under his breath, he realizes the tiny albino totally completely set him up to expose his hiding spots. He desperately tries to think of an escape plan, knowing he needs a major distraction for this to work. He worries that if they spot the loose gunpowder on the floor, he's totally done for. He glances nervously at John, fearing that the Beastkin Knight might smell the explosives, especially since he's standing right there. Knowing one wrong move means death, the assassin tries to talk his way out, awkwardly laughing and claiming he's just hiding his own treasure. Florine plays along, innocently leaning forward and asking to see this special treasure. The assassin sweats bullets, knowing he's screwed. He frantically tries to hide the heavy bomb behind his back, insisting it's too embarrassing to show. He awkwardly steps away, promising to show it to her later, but Florine aggressively demands to see it right now. The assassin internally curses the crazy albino, realizing she's way more reckless than Gerd described. He desperately tries to appeal to John, arguing that it's not even time for the treasure hunt yet. But John simply steps forward, cracking his knuckles. He coldly states that if the young lady wants to see it, he has to hand it over. The assassin nervously agrees, realizing he's totally trapped. Trembling, he slowly hands the massive black bomb to Florine, weakly warning her to handle the valuable treasure carefully. Florine effortlessly lifts the heavy explosive, acting completely bored as she casually tosses it in her tiny paws. The assassin nervously laughs, immediately asking for it back so he can properly hide it. But Florine just stares at him with an incredibly deadpan, knowing expression. With a wicked smirk, she suddenly threatens to throw the live bomb right at him. As the assassin completely panics, she bursts into laughter, yelling gotcha, and claiming it was just a child's prank. The assassin sighs in relief, convincing himself there's absolutely no way she knows what it actually is. But Florine isn't joking. She suddenly rears back and totally chunks the heavy bomb straight into the assassin's face. The explosive nails him right in the eye, and Gerd screams in panic, demanding she give it back. The assassin realizes the gig is completely up. Cursing the crazy little weasel, he knows he has to escape before the bomb actually detonates. But as he turns to run, he suddenly freezes. Why is the fuse completely silent? Florine laughs again, revealing the truth: the bomb was the prank. John casually holds up the dud explosive, standing protectively over the smug little beastkin. The assassin covers his mouth in pure horror, realizing this tiny, terrifying creature actually knew everything and deliberately orchestrated this entire confrontation. He knows that at this rate, he has to frantically recover the remaining bombs, knowing even a small delay will result in a massive explosion that completely wipes out everyone in the building. The assassin realizes this is no longer just about punishment. If this massive incident gets traced back to him, the entire kingdom of Richenbium could literally fall. He glances around nervously, suddenly sensing a dark, overwhelming aura. A massive, terrifying Black Panther steps out of the shadows, blocking his only escape route. The assassin stumbles backward, utterly terrified as he recognizes the woman emerging from the darkness. It's Duchess Inanna Abigail Drivlane. He is completely baffled as to why the famously secluded Duchess is suddenly here. Inanna elegantly fans herself, flanked by her massive spirit panthers. She coldly states that she was told if anyone caused trouble, the culprit would eventually come collect the bombs himself. Her eyes flash with absolute fury. She glares at the trembling assassin, declaring his attempt to disgrace House Driblange is completely unforgivable. With a sharp wave of her fan, she commands her panthers to immediately arrest the traitor. The massive spirit beast brutally pins the assassin to the floor, cutting off his pathetic hiccups. As the chaotic scene resolves, Florine sighs in absolute relief, incredibly grateful for Lady Inanna's overwhelmingly comforting and protective presence. The Duchess smiles warmly, praising Florine for being so incredibly smart at such a young age. She asks how the little furball figured out there were bombs just from spotting gunpowder. Inanna admits she was initially confused when Florine suddenly wanted to play a treasure hunt in the Heirs Hall, but now she sees the brilliant, noble purpose behind the fake game. Florine laughs it off, claiming she just read about it in a book. She explains she knew the culprit would panic and immediately rush to recover the bombs if they thought the servants were about to search the area. The Duchess happily snuggles the tiny albino, wonderfully declaring her an absolute blessing to their family. Inanna promises they'll thoroughly investigate the Drivlane estate to figure out who hired the assassin, but Florine quickly interrupts, assuring her it's fine and she doesn't need to worry. Florine knows that besides Richenbium, no one else could be behind this plot. She figures she might as well handle the rest of the bad guys herself, deciding to subtly play dumb. Staring up innocently, Florine asks Lady Inanna if tutors are officially allowed to physically hit the heirs in Drivlane. Inanna's face instantly drops. She asks what Florine means, and the little beastkin casually mentions that someone named Weasel keeps hitting Ian, claiming it's just discipline. The Duchess's eyes narrow dangerously as she realizes that while she was distracted by high-level politics, the rats have been completely running wild in her own home. She coldly thanks Florine, promising she'll personally handle the rest. Florine sighs in relief, wishing Ian could hear this incredibly happy news, but she realizes she hasn't seen the traumatized boy in a while. She asks Inanna where he might be, wanting to tell him he's finally safe. The Duchess smiles softly, suggesting he's probably hiding in his room, noting he's always been incredibly shy and prefers to be alone. But Florine knows it's not just shyness. Ian is terrified. She eagerly volunteers to go find him, and Inanna points her toward his room on the second floor. As Florine heads toward the heir's wing, she overhears servants gossiping. They mention the Duchess ordered the entire building sealed and evacuated after the bomb threat, but there hasn't been a single peep from Ian. Florine realizes that since the Duchess has been in deep seclusion this entire time, Ian has been completely isolated, meaning he naturally wouldn't trust anyone during an evacuation order. But she smiles, knowing that now that the brutal etiquette master and the assassin are gone, only happiness awaits the poor kid. Arriving at his door with John, Florine cheerfully calls out for Ian, playfully teasing that she knows he's hiding in there. She excitedly tells him about all the amazing food waiting at the banquet, begging him to come downstairs with her. Suddenly, the entire hallway completely erupts. A massive, devastating explosion blows the door right off its hinges. John violently throws himself in front of Florine as a massive fireball absolutely wrecks the corridor, sending burning shrapnel flying everywhere. Florine stares in absolute horror as the heir's wing is instantly engulfed in raging flames, desperately wondering what just happened to Ian.